My name is Joe. These are just opinions. I am Joepinionated. Welcome again to the 25 best albums. The year is 1996. 25 best albums from the year. I've got them all ranked. And check out the playlist for the top 100 songs from 1996 below in the description and on this channel, Joepinionated. Number 25 comes from Tupac. All Eyes on Me. Rap legend. Tupac, originally from Harlem, New York. This is a kind of a East meets West. This is a West Coast hip hop album, and probably one of his greatest albums. All Eyes on Me, arguably his best album. 1996. This is just before Tupac's tragic ending. Poetic rapper, one of the greatest of all time. Tupac Shakur. And the album All Eyes on Me. Number 24 from 1996 comes from the Cranberries. And this is the third of their three best albums, in my opinion. The album is To the Faithful Departed. They're an Irish rock band. Very pretty stuff. Really going in, I think it was 93. They've been mentioned a few times on this channel before. 1996. They're still going pretty hard. I was kind of surprised actually by this album and how much I did like it. Dolores, her vocals, very Irish, the whole Celtic thing. Very pretty stuff. Number 23 comes from Bob Dylan's son, Jacob Dylan, The Wallflowers. I'm going with, and the album is Bringing Down the Horse. It's a big deal. It's like, oh my goodness, Bob Dylan's kid came out with an album and it was really good. It's like, oh, well, hold on a second here. This might be the start of, something huge. But they kind of fizzled out after their second album, really. This album was great. Lots of cool tracks. I believe it had 3 Marlenas on it. One Headlight, The Only Difference, Bringing Down the Horse. Number 22 comes from Pearl Jam. The album in 1996 is No Code. You know who Pearl Jam is. We've got a Pearl Jam Desert Island playlist episode on this channel, Joepinionated. So look up Desert Island Deathmatch Pearl Jam. They just did Mirror Ball with Neil Young the year prior. And, they've basically been on a massive tear since their release of 10. I believe that was 91 or 92. Maybe around the time this came out, it was sort of, oh, what's Pearl Jam doing now? There were some haters at the time, but I think by now most people realize that Pearl Jam never fell off. No Code, number 22. Number 21, self-titled Sublime. I believe it's self-titled, from 1996. Bradley Nowell. Eric Wilson. Was it Bud Gow? Go. Sublime. Lots of great tracks on this. Santeria. This is when I found out who Sublime was, because it's when my buddy made me the mixtape. I hadn't heard Bad Fish or their cover of Toots 5446 at this point. So Santeria, I believe, was the first track I remember hearing from Sublime, and I think that Bradley Nowell had already passed away around that time anyways. Shout out to Ian, thanks for that, and shout out to my buddy Brad, who later played it for me and my other friend Dawn to death in our car rides to and from school. Number 20 comes from Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. His album in 1996 is Murder Ballads, featuring one of my favorite Nick Cave cinematic tracks, Stagger Lee, which was featured in the last episode, which was 25 best songs of 1996. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Listen to this album quite a bit with my friend Mark from Live Jimmy Presley. Shout out to Mark. Rest in peace, brother. Nick Cave, it means a lot to me because of that, because of old friendships and sentimental Murder Ballads. Love it. One of my favorite Nick Cave albums. Number 19, I'm going with The Refreshments. Fizzy, Fuzzy, Big and Buzzy is the album from The Refreshments in 1996. Some people see it as a one-hit wonder for their song Banditos. I'm here to tell you it's not a one-hit wonder at all. This album is full of great songs. Mexico being one of my very favorite tracks from this album, from The Refreshments. So maybe you forgot about that. How far down do you want to go? We could talk it out over a cup of Joe, and you could look deep into my eyes like I was a supermodel, or I could look deep into your eyes like you were a supermodel. I forget the words. Number 18 is a rap album from a rap super duo, one of the greatest duos in rap history, OutKast, and their song ATLiens. ATLiens. I always called it ATLiens growing up. but I've heard different pronunciations. They're from Atlanta, Georgia, and it's Big Boy and Andre 3000 and this group of guys, Goody Mob, producers, friends, Killer Mike, guys like that. ATLiens, really a breakout album for these guys. Southern Playlist of Cadillac Music had come out before, but was still a little bit more underground. ATLiens, I believe, is when they kind of blew up. Yeah, huge fan of OutKast. Check out the channel for more episodes on OutKast. I believe it was the 15 best OutKast songs. They've only got a few albums, so ranking the albums would be almost pointless. But lots of output from these guys. Some great soundtrack songs too, and even The Whole World from their greatest hits album. Lots of great singles, anyways. From OutKast, ATLiens, chock full of them. ATLiens from OutKast. Number 17, Fiona Apple's debut album, Tidal. Great year, 96, has a lot of my most listened to albums. I was in high school this time. I fell hard for Fiona Apple. I thought, for her as well as her music. Incredible songwriter, incredible soundscape throughout this album and throughout everything from this album. I mentioned the songs. This is almost like an adolescent, Fiona Apple album in a way. It feels a very, adolescent and a lot of like early adult teenage themes going on here. But, you grow with Fiona throughout these albums, and she kind of grows as well from here to, even Extraordinary Machine. There's just such growth from each album. This album's chock full of hits. Shadow Boxer, Sleep to Dream, Criminal, Never Is a Promise. The album's full of them. And it's incredible playing, singing, emotions from Fiona Apple. Very unique artist and one of my faves. Number 16 comes from Odds. The album is Nest. Odds have been featured on this channel, are on some of these 25 best lists previously. They're a Canadian band, Odds. And Nest, full of hits. Make You Mad, one of my favorite Odds songs, is off of this album, Nest. Shout out to Tristan from the Tristones. Definitely turned me on to this band and had their CDs and stuff like that. And they're from the area. I actually see some of them walking around from time to time. Great album. Number 16 going on Odds. Number 15 for 25 best albums from 1996. De La Soul, Stakes is High. Stakes is High from De La Soul. And that's Masio, the DJ, Trugoy the Dove, Posthumous, De La Soul. Rap pioneers, jazz rap pioneers, alongside Tribe Called Quest. These guys are, pioneers, jazz rap pioneers. De La Soul. Funky, thoughtful, thought-provoking lyrics. These guys hail from Long Island, New York. I think Long Island now, is that where... I think that Chuck D was from Long Island too. He's from just maybe outside of, maybe the far side of Queens. Was it Long Island? I think he was from Long Island. Oh, so there you go. Okay, so De La Soul and I believe Chuck D, two very important groups, Public Enemy and De La Soul and rap. And this is later on, De La Soul. This is way after they kind of peaked in the late 80s, early 90s, but still coming out with some awesome stuff. Stakes is High is a good album. Number 14 is from Weezer, the album Pinkerton. That's their second album, and these are all great albums. We're getting into like 4.5 star territory now with everything. And Pinkerton, what's not to love from this? I believe it's a breakup album. So many great tracks. El Scorcho, so great. But yeah, there's like a whole mythology behind this album too, and I really love Weezer. And this is arguably, it's like the Weezer hardcore, the Weezer faithful. A lot of them have Pinkerton as number one. I don't, even though I do love it. And I will be doing an albums ranking for Weezer one of these days. It's actually, I need to listen to, I think, 2 more albums before I can make it. Pinkerton, chock full of amazing tracks. Number 13, Rage Against the Machine, Evil Empire. Evil Empire was, I was really looking forward to this album when it came out. I loved the first Rage Against the Machine album. And that was like kind of, when the first one came out, I was 91 or 92. I was almost kind of too young to be listening to that stuff. And that's part of what made it really cool to me in the first place. But when this album came out in 96, Rage Against the Machine was my favorite band, And it was Rage Against the Machine and Beck, Odelay. And this album actually, kind of put me over the top for Rage Against the Machine because I thought it was very interesting. And you know, is it as good as the first album? Probably not. The first album is easier to listen to, but the lyrics are just as good as the first album. And they did some different stuff with this album. I think Down Rodeo is such a great track. I think that Vietnam is such an underappreciated track. Evil Empire, Bulls on Parade was, you know, this was kind of pushed them into mainstream because their first album was still seen as so political. Had the cover that, you know, got blocked on my YouTube channel because I put the cover on one point. C'est la vie to the old folks. Yeah, love Rage Against the Machine and Evil Empire, number 13 from 1996. I can't believe it's that low. Number 12 comes from a Tribe Called Quest. Beats, Rhymes, and Life. Thanks to my buddy GP for showing me this album. Great album. What's not to love about Tribe Called Quest, right? Ali Shaheed Muhammad, Phife Dawg, Q-Tip. I mean, absolutely nothing these guys did wasn't perfection. Every album great, every album worth buying. This is actually one of the first ones I bought because my buddy Graham told me to check that this is sort of an underrated album, and I agree with him. And then I actually gave it to him later on for one of his birthdays. But Beats, Rhymes, and Life is an excellent album from A Tribe Called Quest, one of the greatest groups in hip-hop history. Number 11 comes from Super Furry Animals. The album is Fuzzy Logic. This came to me from, it was an album of the week on a Discord music ranking group called Taste Like Music. Yeah, somebody submitted this and it was one of my favorite albums of the week for that year. I believe actually maybe even my number one. I think I had it, you know, high, or is it 4-star or 4.5 star? Full of great psychedelic rock pop tracks. I don't know how to describe it. It's pretty original stuff. They're a Welsh group, right? Yeah, they're from Wales. They're from Wales. Different melodic, weird, very experimental psychedelic pop. Number 10 comes from They Might Be Giants. And the album is Factory Showdown. That's John and John from They Might Be Giants, and with another banger album of great hooks the whole way through. I'm late to the party on They Might Be Giants. I'm kind of kicking myself. I'm still kind of discovering their music to this day, but every album that I do in one of these rankings, I go back to. Factory Showroom is another great album from They Might Be Giants and a series of great albums. Number 9, it's Stone Temple Pilots and their album Tiny Music, Songs from the Vatican gift shop, sorry. I mean, these guys just really, for me, especially in the 90s, these guys don't miss. I like their stuff later on too. I don't know, Days of the Week, I believe is 2001. But yeah, Stone Temple Pilots, incredible. Scott Weiland, electric frontman. If grunge had started, you know, a year later or 2 years later, then we might be talking about these guys as the greatest grunge group of all time, because they sort of came out just after Soundgarden and Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains. And it's just that 1 or 2 years that changes everything, that pushes these guys into the post-grunge category or whatever it is. Stupid. These guys are pioneers. These guys are just as good as those guys. And another incredible album from them, full of hooks, full of great tracks. Again, and even though they're from California or whatever, it's San Diego or San Francisco or something like that. Number 8, Prince and his album Chaos and Disorder. Another great album from Prince. You know, I really like this era. Chaos and Disorder was a surprise for me when I did the Prince deep dive on this channel. Check out my episodes. I still need to do a top songs for Prince, but I did the top 25 albums for Prince on this channel. Check it out. One of the greatest guitar players of all time. Prince, an incredible writer. Number 7, I'm going with the Dave Matthews Band, and their album from 1996 is Crash. Loved this album, especially when I first had my car. Sounds great in a car. Their vinyl pressings that they've been releasing the last few years, especially the numbered ones, are some of the best pressed vinyl wax LPs I've ever heard. Sound quality is incredible. The recordings are insane on these albums. Crash, this album, you know, that's got the big Crash Into Me hook, Song of the Summer, that sort of thing. And these guys are super popular with, you know, the college crowd. There's a lot of people that can't stand the Dave Matthews Band. Part of it's because they were so popular. Part of it is people don't like Dave's voice. I get it. A lot of the later stuff I'm not really that crazy about, but it has nothing to do with the fact they were a huge college or Dave's voice, because I like Dave's voice quite a bit and his guitar playing. This is the first 3 albums, especially Before These Crowded Streets, Crash, Under the Table and Dreaming. To me, There's no misses whatsoever. These are 3 solid albums. We're smack dead in the middle of that right here. Spend a lot of time with this album. Great album, start to finish. Album number 6 comes from Soundgarden. It's Down on the Upside. This is sort of this is their last big one before they broke up, which sucks. But it's cool that Chris Cornell went and did Audio Slave and solo stuff, and but what isn't cool is that you have Ben Shepherd and Kim Thayil almost on the sidelines for a decade before King Animal comes out. And now, because Chris passed away, now we don't see these guys that much or near enough. Like, why? Ben Shepherd and Kim Thayil are incredible musicians. The stuff they wrote is insane. And obviously Matt Cameron kept working with Pearl Jam. Great album from Soundgarden. My favorite from the grunge scene is Soundgarden. Always has been. Down on the Upside album, start to finish, great. Number 5, Tool, Ænima. I'm not sure. I don't know. I always called it Ænima. So Tool, Ænima. I forget what that means. I think it's like doing drugs up your butt or something like that. Maynard, Adam Jones on guitar, apparently a really cool guy. Justin Chancellor on bass, Danny Carey on drums. One of the best bands in the world to this day. One of the tightest bands, one of the coolest live shows I've ever seen. One of the best concerts I've ever seen was Tool. This was definitely the album that got me into Tool. Shout out to Eric, and it was him over in Vancouver that had this album. And I remember listening to it in the basement of that crazy house they lived in. Instant fan. Thought it was great. I remember making a tape right around the same time and recording this album. Like, as soon as I heard it, I got a copy of the CD and taped a copy of the CD, which was something you could do back then. Ænima, Stinkfest. This thing is just full of these complex rhythms, heavy riffs, some of the best lyrics ever from Maynard. Number 4, I'm going to Ween, the 12 Golden Country Greats. There's 10 songs on the album. 12 Golden Country Greats refers to the 12 country legends, studio musicians that took part in this album and recording of this album. Dean and Gene Ween have a band called Ween. In this album, Gene and Dean Ween wrote 10 songs, and they got session musicians from Nashville like the Jordanaires and people that appeared on every classic Nashville country album you've ever heard. There's so many people on this album that are just top tier in every category. Elvis, Waylon Jennings, it worked with everybody, okay? Willie, Dolly, everybody. And now Ween. So Ween, they sing and they play guitar on every one of these tracks, but they also have these, instead of having their regular bandmates with them or recording the drums and stuff like they normally do themselves, the bass, sometimes the Andrew Weiss from the Rollins band. Anyways, they've got these Nashville legends. And they're singing songs like Piss Up a Rope and they're singing some songs that are, kind of R-rated, but like normal people lingo, hilarious stuff, great, deep, wonderful country songs the whole way through. This is like some of my favorite country music of all time is on this Ween album. And that's one of the reasons I'm a huge Ween fan. And check out my channel for the however many Ween episodes. I got the top 100 songs. I got every album, an episode for every album. So if you love Ween, hail Bugnish, check out the channel for more. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Number 3 for albums, 25 best albums from 1996. Number 3, I'm going with the Tragically Hip, Trouble at the Hen House. That's Rob Baker, Paul Langlois, Gord Sinclair, I already said Robbie Baker, Johnny Faye, and Gord Downey. The Tragically Hip, Canadian royalty. Really, I think I'm allowed to say that. First concert I ever went to, first concert I took my kid to. Tragically Hip. The first concert I went to was the tour for this show, for this album, Trouble at the Hen House from the Tragically Hip. One of their best albums and one of my favorite albums of the 90s. The top 10, really. I mean, this is a strong year for music because I was in high school. This album, Trouble at the Hen House, is one of the albums responsible for my love of music, period. This is a very important one to me personally because this is the album that got me into the Tragically Hip, who became my favorite band for a period of time and one of my favorite bands of all time. Yeah, Trouble at the Hen House, Gift Shop, great song, Don't Wake Daddy, Flamenco, 700 Foot Ceiling, Sherpa, Apartment Song, Ahead by a Century, Springtime in Vienna. I could go on. Number 2 comes from Beck, and the album is Odelay. And for the longest time, this would easily be the number one album for me from 1996. One of my favorite albums of all time. Beck Odelay, Dust Brothers featured on this one. But I love every song on this album. Every song on this album, from Devil's Haircut to Ramshackle and everything in between. One of my most listened to albums of all time. One of my, Beck and Rage Against the Machine in high school, I would say were my two favorite bands. That's what I'd usually tell people, and then later on Tragically Hip. But I don't know what to say. Odelay is one of my very favorite albums, start to finish. I'd love to talk about every song on the album. I recently did a Beck episode on this channel where we made Desert Island playlists for Beck. I love it. Every song, all the Dust Brothers samples throughout, all the voice samples, all the little audio clips. Tristan Armstrong, who has an album coming out right away here, Lonely Avenue from Tristan Armstrong, mentioned it's like a sound collage, this album. It's very 90s, and Beck, kind of defined the 90s in a lot of ways. And Odelay, has to be one of the biggest albums of the 90s, period. Not just, from me. I'm just like, if you're ranking greatest albums of the 90s, Odelay's got to be top 10. It's got to be. Number one for albums from 1996 from me, Joepinionated, remember, like, comment, subscribe, comes from Cake, and the album is Fashion Nugget. And this wouldn't have been my number one if you asked me in 1996. It probably wouldn't have been my number one if you asked me in 2003. But this one's crept up for sure. I love Cake. Fashion Nugget, arguably their best album. Definitely one of the top three for Cake for me anyways. This one and the next two. This is the last one featuring Greg Brown on guitar, and he is missed because he's a very unique guitar player. Very cool, like, country twang guitar. And Cake is kind of like almost like a mariachi inspired pop rock band, alternative rock band. Love Cake, saw them live a couple times, some of the best concert experiences of my life. Very, very fun shows. And this album is just, again, like Beck Odelay, like the Ween album, like the Tragically Hip album, start to finish, every song is awesome. Like, really good. Beautiful to funny to witty to great guitar, once again, from Greg Brown, and great writing from McRae. What else can you say? Great band, Cake, Fashion Nugget, arguably their best album. And check out Cake Desert Island playlist, Cake's top, I forget how many songs I did, but 20 songs, I think, on his channel. So that's it. 25 best albums of 1996 is all over. Remember to be normal, live and let live. Check out the playlist for top 100 songs from 1996 on this channel currently. Remember to check out the next episode, all that stuff. I'm sorry, I'm a little low on facts and high on opinions. We'll catch you on the next one. Respect to Cake, Fashion Nugget, the best album of 1996. We out.